Lots of news going on around the NFL, lots of injuries that could be impacting your fantasy rosters for Week 13. The NFL Network reporting that Josh Jacobs will be limited in practice, but Jacobs said following the game on Sunday when he had 1 billion total yards and 2 touchdowns to help the Seahawks, helped to defeat the Seahawks in overtime, that he should be good to go. We'll talk about the calf injury there for the star running back. Melvin Gordon joining the Chiefs practice squad. We'll see what that means for Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon. Michael Carter 50-50 to play in Week 13. Robert Saleh saying he's day-to-day. Travis Etienne should play in Week 13 as the Jaguars take on the Lions. J.K. Dobbins could practice this week as the window is now open for him to return. Could be a good waiver wire addition for you. Joe Mixon should also play in Week 13 as the Bengals have a huge game against the Chiefs, and they should also get Jamar Chase back on the field as well. Elijah Mitchell likely done for the regular season as he suffered another sprained MCL. Damian Harris is unlikely to play Thursday night as the Patriots take on the Bills. Darnell Mooney done for the season. Jameson Williams hoping to return soon. Kadarius Toney day-to-day, and Deshaun Watson has been reinstated, so make sure he's not on the waiver wire because he could be a #1 fantasy quarterback to close the season. Let's talk about a few of these storylines here as we get into it, starting with the scenario in Las Vegas with Josh Jacobs. So we know he had the calf injury going into the Seahawks game. He re-injured himself against Seattle. Did not matter because he came back into the game and, as we know, had the walk-off with the game-winning touchdown in overtime. You see here over 300 total yards, 2 touchdowns. He was an absolute monster with 47 PPR points. But then we get the NFL Network report that says he's going to be limited in practice if he practices at all. And this is an injury to monitor going into a big game, a fantastic matchup against the Chargers. So Zamir White would probably be the next guy up. Amir Abdullah is going to factor in as well. How are you approaching the Raiders' backfield for this week?
I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Josh Jacobs plays, but if I've got Jacobs, I'm making Zamir White the priority off the waiver wire. And I'm not going to mess around with the other running backs in Pittsburgh and New York. I want to get the guy behind him. It's a great matchup. 9 of the last 10 games, every starting running back to play against the Chargers has had at least 10 non-PPR points. Jacobs should be able to do double that. But I think Zamir White, if he's in that rushing downs role like we expect him to, he could get you 10 non-PPR points. I think he's absolutely worth targeting. If I've got Jacobs, or even if I don't have Jacobs, make it a priority, maybe on your second, third waiver claim, maybe a few bucks a fab to get him on your bench.
Yeah, we'll show you where Zamir White and Amir Abdullah stack up in terms of the running back waiver wire options when we get to that a little bit later in the show. But Jacobs did say following the game that he expected the injury to still be a problem, but he expects also to be fine for Week 13. So not necessarily reason to panic, but obviously cover yourself with Zamir White. Heath, the Chiefs are going to add Melvin Gordon, so all he needs to do now is play for the Raiders, and then he will cover himself for the entire AFC West. He was a failure with the Broncos this season. What does he mean for the Chiefs, who are still trying to figure out their running back situation with Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon?
I think he's probably just security, just a hope. I mean, first you find out, can he run and not fumble the football? Right. We're going to work on that for a couple of weeks. I don't think they like very much what they have in Ronald Jones. They've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire on IR. Isaiah Pacheco made a couple of mistakes, so this is kind of the next guy up just in case. He can do some of the things that Jerick McKinnon does in the passing game as well, and McKinnon's had his fair share of injuries. I don't think I'm adding him in anything but like a 14-team league or deeper.
Okay, so more of a deeper league stash for you, understandably so. He's not on the active roster, but that's probably something that's going to happen, and they put Ronald Jones probably on the inactive list once again, so just keep an eye on that. Not officially with the Chiefs, but that's the expectation that he's going to sign with the Chiefs. Dave, the Jets, we don't know exactly what's going on with their backfield, so Michael Carter, according to Robert Saleh, is day-to-day, dealing with a low ankle sprain, not a high ankle sprain, so that's a good situation for Michael Carter. But what did we see when Carter left? We saw Zonovan Knight, I'm going to get it right today, Heath, Zonovan Knight take over with...
You call him Bam.
I call him Bam, but I want to be official because yesterday I was just butchering it all across the board. So 17 total touches, 3 catches in the game, and what did we hear from Robert Saleh was that they felt that they were not getting enough production from James Robinson, and that's why they made the switch to go with Knight as opposed to Robinson being inactive. The wording from Robert Saleh was they left a little bit too much meat on the bone in their ground game. So make sense of it. Carter in, Carter out. What do we like for the Jets?
I think it's going to be tough to make perfect prescient sense out of it because the Jets are going to use multiple running backs. That's just the way that they roll. That's the way we should expect it for however long Robert Saleh is their head coach or until Breece Hall comes back and is dominant. That's not happening until 2023. Carter's going to share with Zonovan Knight if they're both playing. I'll like Carter a little bit more than Zonovan Knight, but both of them are going to be flex plays at best if they both play next week. If Carter is out, then I think Zonovan Knight could be a low-end #2 running back. I really do. I think he would be their main guy. Ty Johnson would end up being their passing downs guy, and I think Zonovan could have a chance to score against Minnesota. They have a lot of touchdowns lately to running backs, just not a lot of rushing yards.
I know for you, you think Knight is the better pass catcher because he had more receptions, but Johnson played more on third downs.
Right.
So how are you going to approach that?
Well, I think that what we're going to see with Mike White at quarterback is because they're not just going to throw to running backs on third downs. He's going to throw to running backs on first down, second down. Anytime he drops back, he's thinking look to the running back. So I do think both those guys would be in play. Ty Johnson as a low-end flex, and I agree with Dave. Van Knight would be a low-end number 2 running back.
You like Knight better or Snell better if both start?
I think I like Knight better, just because I don't trust Benny Snell, but they are both right in that RB24 range.
Yeah, we could show if you want to later when we get to the running backs. I'm going to throw something at the producers, but I did a poll on who would be the most, who should you add if both are starting. Benny Snell was running away with it, which is a little surprise, but I'm torn on it as well. We'll talk about that when we get to the running backs. Heath, when we look at the Jaguar situation, Travis Etienne expected to play. Not an easy matchup, though, against Detroit. Everybody looks at it as a layup, but this Lions run defense has been much better.
They have not given up a double-digit PPR fantasy points to a running back since week 7. They've only given up 2 touchdowns over that time. One of those was Alec Ingold. The other one was Matt Breida. And they've faced some really good running backs they've shut down, including Saquon Barkley. I still think if Etienne is starting, he is a high-end number 2 running back. If Etienne is out, JaMychal Hasty's a low-end number 2 running back. I don't like the fact for Etienne that they seem more willing to use Hasty in the passing game than they do Travis Etienne.
Yeah, it's a little strange, and we'll find out if Darrell Henderson gets activated. He was just joining the team last week, so we'll see what his role is. But good news for Travis Etienne that he's trending in the right direction. I'm going to stay with you, Heath, because I know you've loved J.K. Dobbins, and he's expected now to start to practice. So how much interest do you have in maybe adding J.K. Dobbins, who's 57% rostered right now?
Yeah, it's very similar to Jameson Williams. I would like to have him on my bench or in my IR slot because I do think if everything in a perfect world goes right for J.K. Dobbins, he could have league-winning upside in the fantasy playoffs. If you're fighting for a playoff spot, I don't expect he's going to help you get there at all.
Week 15, I think he gets Jacksonville. Week 15 he gets Cleveland. I think week 16 he gets Jacksonville. He has 2 very favorable matchups in 15 and 16, and so those are the situations I'm looking for J.K. Dobbins, and I hope he's healthy by that point. Dave, when it comes to Joe Mixon, look, he missed the game last week. It's not like we missed the production because Samaje Perine was great against a very, very difficult matchup. Kudos to Heath for ranking Perine as high as you did. How do you approach this now? Because are we going to see maybe more of a split, knowing that Perine 2 games ago, before Mixon got hurt, was a huge factor in the passing game, and then he has this monster game against the Titans, or are we going right back to Joe Mixon and no hesitation?
It's kind of been that way for the Bengals all year. There hasn't been a game where Joe Mixon has dominated and played 90% of the snaps. Perine handles passing downs work. Joe Mixon handles rushing downs work. And I think in the matchup against Kansas City, they're going to need both of them to make plays. Mixon's going to be a top 15 fantasy running back, maybe even a number 1 guy, low-end number 1 running back if he plays. But until he's cleared, Perine's got to be in the mix as a high to middle-end number 2 rusher.
Right. Don't drop Perine yet if you picked him up, just in case. But the reports are that Mixon's going to play. I think he's a top 10 guy this week because this is going to be a huge shootout. And Joe Mixon's been such a factor in the passing game with Perine. Dave, I'll stay with you. Jamar Chase coming back. What does this mean for T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Hayden Hurst?
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome for everybody in Cincinnati because I expect them to throw and do well against Kansas City.
But can it be awesome for Higgins still to the same level?
I think it can still be good for Higgins.
Boyd has been bad
not to the same level. Not to the same level for Higgins. But still, look, you're going to start T. Higgins. He's going to be a
But what about Boyd? You say awesome for everybody. Can you trust Boyd?
Boyd is going to be a number 3 receiver at best. Not one that you're going to feel particularly good with. You've got to be a little disappointed that he hasn't been amazing in the 2 games without Jamar Chase. I'm a little worried about how effective Chase will be in his first game back. He's missed 4 games. Might he have some rust to knock off? That could help and open things up underneath for guys like Boyd and Hayden Hurst. Hurst is going to end up being a top 12 tight end for me by default this week just because there isn't anything there. And Boyd, like I said, low-end number 3 guy. It's going to be good for Burrow, though. He should be a top 5 quarterback.
You're going to see that I have Boyd on the drop list later. So that's where I think of Tyler Boyd at this point. Just bad performance and just hasn't really done much. Huge performances with Jamar Chase on the field. So you could use him as a number 3 receiver if you still want to, but I think there's just a lot of wide receivers you can add this week that are in much better situations than Tyler Boyd. The Chiefs, Kadarius Toney, day-to-day. Last week we got Juju Smith-Schuster coming back and Andy Reid saying that they had packages in place, but they didn't use him. So it makes sense of the use him to the same level. Makes sense of the Chiefs receiving core. Sky Moore, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Again, same big matchup against that Bengals defense. Does
seem like they were being really cautious with Juju Smith-Schuster. I expect him to play a full complement of steps this week and be a number 2 wide receiver. I have 0 interest in Marquez Valdes-Scantling. A little bit of interest in still rostering Sky Moore in case Kadarius Toney can't get back. And Toney, like J.K. Dobbins and Jameson Williams, someone I'd like to have on my bench just in case he could somehow be healthy for week 15 through 17. I do think he could make a special kind of impact. But again, I don't expect he's going to help you get to the playoffs. All right, so keep an eye on the Toney situation. That will impact Sky Moore. Sky Moore with 6 targets each of the last 2 games. That's with Mecole Hardman being out, but Toney also being banged up as well. So just something to monitor there. We'll show you where Sky Moore is still as a waiver wire option when we get to the wide receivers a little bit later in the show. And then, Dave, it's a big story clearly this week. Deshaun Watson
is going to play. He's been reinstated now, and he's taking on his former team for the Texans. So is he a #1 fantasy quarterback?
Half of me thinks the Browns are going to do the right thing and just run the ball like crazy, take advantage of that terrible Houston defense. They've got the running backs to do it. And half of me thinks that they're going to let Deshaun Watson have his just desserts against the Texans team that deserted him last year. My guess is that it's going to be both for everything to happen there for Cleveland, where they're going to be able to do whatever they want against this terrible Texans defense. I feel better about the running backs coming through than I do Deshaun Watson. He is a borderline #1 fantasy quarterback in his first game back.
Yeah, I think you worry about rust. I mean, it's been 2 years, and when we saw him in the preseason, he didn't exactly look like Deshaun Watson. And then there's this weird thing with the Texans defense, how they've been a terrible matchup for fantasy quarterbacks so far this season. They really only had a couple of them have great days. Nobody scoring more than 25 fantasy points against them all season long, and that's because they have the worst run defense in the league, and teams just run on them. That's what the Browns like to do.